So after that inspiration phase, it goes into the ideation phase. So it's around brainstorming solutions. So once you've got all of that information from your user, you can really start thinking, okay, how might we? And I think that's really important. I know we've spoken about it as well, and you've sort of spoken to me about how that question can be so useful. But just saying, like, how might we solve this problem, whatever the problem is, and using the information that you've got from your user to start answering those questions. So I think that's cool, and a really awesome part of that process as well, which I know we've tried together when we're brainstorming.
Tell us more.
Is how you can it's so important to brainstorm as many ideas as possible. And I wish I knew this a long time ago, because I can often, when I'm trying to be creative or come up with an answer to a solution, I can get really stuck and try and come up with the one solution that I think is the right one. And really like judge myself and think I'm not allowed to like come up with solutions that are silly or like a bit crazy. But this process really looks at how you can just come up with as many solutions as possible. It doesn't matter how wacky or obvious or silly it may be, and the more that you come up with, the more likely you are to find that perfect solution. And part of that process as well is to only spend, say, 15 to 20 minutes per question, so you can keep your brain really fresh. And sort of giving yourself a timer so you can just come up with as many solutions as possible. Like try and come up with a crazy amount, like tell the group that they have to come up with, say, 30 solutions for this one question in a small amount of time, and just see what you get from that. I think that can be like really effective.
That's cool.
And motivating.
No, it's cool. And I think, do you want to share, remember when we did that activity for the first time, coming up with the ideas? And I think the question was something around how might we improve bullying and harassment incidents in the workplace, is where it started. And then you guys, you had your time to like actually get in there and do your ideas, and then to expand that, do you want to, we then said, okay, it was started with like 2 minutes to come up with however many ideas, or 5 minutes, and you guys got like 15 or whatever it was, and then it was like, okay, now pretend you're Apple and go do it again. So do you want to share that experience and what went on for you?
So that initial brainstorm, that we didn't have the information about working for Apple. So it was interesting, because I know we spoke about as well how you can often, like, you come up with solutions, you get stuck, and then you're like, oh gosh, like I have nothing left, like I have no idea what else to say, or like come up. But if you have that timer and you know you at the end you need to talk about what you come up with, you end up thinking all of these things you never thought you'd think of. And all of a sudden, like, you stop and then you go on this other track and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm coming up with all these things like I never thought I'd think of. So I found that process really interesting, how if you put that limit, that timer on, and take away that judgment of it has to be like the best answer there is. It's amazing what you can come up with. So that was probably the insight for the first part of the brainstorming. And then it was really interesting, because when you said it was for Apple, like the solutions were so different. Like it's amazing how, like, it was all about like putting it on an app and having like technology, and it just, the way that I was coming up with solutions for them was so different. And when we like looked at the difference at the end, I was like, how amazing is that? Like, if I, like, you think there's a solution and you just come up with the best answers, but something like changing who that solution is for, just changing the company, can have such a big impact on what you actually come up with and what works for them. So it just made me think, like, how often does that happen out in the world, where people don't understand their audience and create something that's totally different from what would be most useful for them? It's interesting.
That's cool. And it does, I feel like, when you are, it's like you change your state of mind, you change your framing. So almost immediately, with Apple, you're no longer thinking about where you currently work or the current constraints that you're trying to solve the problem with. When you think about Apple, they're obviously like this really massive company, and they have huge budgets and revenue and things like that. So your mind expands to, okay, let's get it going. Which is really cool, because even now when I'm like thinking about, oh, imagine if we were doing something for Apple now. I'm like, holy crap, like, oh my God, I can feel my mind racing.
There's so many possibilities.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there was another book I was reading recently called Think Wrong. And it was about trying to change how you're basically like the brain looks for patterns and shortcuts to help you make your life easier. And it was trying to break how that happens. And they have in the book Think Wrong, they have like a series of kind of activities that you can do. And one of them around the ideation thing is they say, okay, you and 3 people, like they give you constraints and they go, you and 3 people are now the team and you have to solve this problem. You have $100 and 3 days to do it. And you basically have to come up with this like mission plan. And already you can see that urgency and like the constraints that needs to be done on a budget and just get it done, tick whatever needs to happen. And I think that's another kind of way. Like there's lots of things out there in the world that can help expand your mind or restrict it or just change that state to be able to come up with new ideas and think about it differently and not have the stagnant thinking that can tend to come naturally from the organization that you're in. And that's why maybe problems haven't been solved in new or innovative ways. And you try to always, you think that's not possible here, or this is the way that we've always done it. So I really definitely recommend, hey, those kind of activities to open it.
Yeah, for sure. I know, I remember it's sort of reminding me as you're talking, but at a previous workplace that we were at, when we were brainstorming, I remember like we had to come up with, it was like, what if you could do this? And it could be something completely crazy. Yeah. So it could be like, what if like soft drink came out of the taps in the kitchen, like something crazy like that.
Yeah. And then like the next person had to start their sentence with what if. Yeah. And you kept going around and it just got very big. Yeah, that was cool. I like that.
And it's amazing how just like having that, changing that filter to the way you're thinking can, like you can come up with so much more. Yeah. And be so much more creative. Yeah. So I think that's I would definitely recommend using that process. So even as like if you're facilitating a session, just like setting the tone and you're like even yourself coming up with some crazy idea so the group can be like, oh cool, like we can come up with crazy stuff as well. And it won't necessarily be the right idea, but someone else might be like, oh, like now that you've said that, I've just thought of this, and then that could lead to like the perfect solution, like you would never know.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, like because I went to this event last night and it was on EdTech, so educational technology, and the guy that was talking was a 17-year-old, and his name, he was so inspirational. It was amazing. His name's Scott Miller. He owns Bop Industries, and it's about bringing technology education workshops into schools and teaching kids STEM or STEAM, he calls it, with artistic kind of like framing to it as well. But he kind of said, like, we were like, oh, why do you love doing what you do, you know? And he was just like, kids are amazing because they have no limits in their thinking. If you say think blue sky or think what's possible, they go with all these crazy ideas. And he was like, what's the go with like adults? Because obviously we think differently and we have, I don't know what happens, but instead of going out this way where anything's possible, we start to go down this way. And it was really interesting that he made that observation. And I think, like you just said, with as a facilitator, it's really cool if you can set the standard and be that gobshite yourself so that people feel more comfortable to kind of get rid of those inhibitions or like, oh, my idea is going to be stupid, you know, and just go for it. Like, because the process is more fun if you do come up with those crazy, wacky ideas, have a laugh. And I know we've gone down that track before and we get a good ab workout when it happens. Yeah. Oh, it was cool. It was really good.